Hello, my brothers and sisters, and welcome to another episode of Off the Beaten Path, the show that looks at paranormal events both historically as well as in modern day times. As always, I'm your host, Rev.Hagen, and as always, I'd like to welcome our listeners at SCRMradio.com. That's SCRMradio.com for all your horror and paranormal needs. Stay tuned to Scream Radio. Listen to Scream Radio Live. We've got creepypastas, this show, movie reviews, interviews with hot directors and actors. Really exciting, and it's expanding exponentially, which we'll get into in later episodes, just to let you know what's going on at Scream. But for now, let's get our show started here, for those at Scream and on YouTube. Now, we don't have time for strange and unusual facts today, sadly. I know you're all bummed about it, but try to get a hold of yourself, because we just have 2 minutes to get into for our main case today, which is, drumroll please, actual drumroll, very exciting, the Amityville haunting. Yes, that's right, the Amityville haunting. The case that spawned one book, 18 movies with the name Amityville in them, as well as being mentioned in The Conjuring 2 when the Warrens went to investigate the Amityville house. That's 19 films, one book, countless documentaries. They are milking this thing literally for every penny that they can get. If they could go to the house and literally squeeze it to get more money out of this story, they would. That being said, we're going to look at the nuts and bolts of this case, all right? And if we want to look at this case, we're going to do it like we would if we were investigating the case. Now, unfortunately, it's very hard to get the records pre-1975 of what happened in this house. But this is what we do know. The real case starts in 1974 at 6:30 p.m., Wednesday, November 13th, when the police department, the Suffolk County Police Department, I should say, got a call that, and heard a voice say, "You've got to help me. I think my mother and father are shot." Now, that phone call was from Ronald Joseph Butch DeFeo Jr., who we're just going to call Butch from this point out. It turned out, when the police did show up, that his entire family had been killed. Ronald Jr.'s parents, Robert DeFeo Sr., Louise DeFeo, his 4 siblings, Don, Allison, Mark, and John. They were all victims. They were all shot with a .35 caliber rifle, shot to death. It turned out that at about 3 o'clock in the morning, the day before this, the parents were both shot twice. While the children had all been killed with single shots, the physical evidence suggests that Louise DeFeo and her daughter Allison, this is kind of grisly, were both awake at the time of their deaths, and according to the Suffolk County Police, the victims were all found lying on their stomachs in bed. Now, while he denied it initially, later we found out that he did do it. He confessed to the killings, but he said later that he heard voices plotting against him, which motivated his actions. So right off the bat, there's been a tragedy in this house. Now, this is 1 year before the Lutz family moved in on December 19th, 1975. So if I were looking at this case, and this is something that I had stumbled upon, you would really have to look to see, okay, now, is this kid was this gentleman, I should say, schizophrenic, that heard voices to tell him to do these? Was there an actual presence in there? Was there a history of mental illness in the DeFeo family? Just things to consider, and things that a responsible investigator would consider if he was looking at this. But you got to remember, too, that this case was broke in 1976, 77, where paranormal investigation was probably, at least mainly, about 20 or 30 years old, and that's being generous. Probably about 30 to 20, right? Or 20, right around 20 years old. And was not viewed at very popularly. It still isn't. We're still part of the nut fringe, if we're being honest with ourselves, and I hope we can be here, even though to me the evidence is absolutely overwhelming for the proof of spirits, demonic presences. Is that a word? UFOs, cryptoids, the whole 9 yards. I think that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence to prove the validity of these things. But we're still definitely fringe. So, to get back to the story, the Lutz family moved in December 1975, and most of the furniture in the house was still there from the DeFeos when the Lutz family moved in. It was part of a $400 deal to move into the house, right? It was the $400 was for all the furniture that was left over. Now, a friend of theirs, and I believe his name was a friend of George Lutz, learned about the history of the house after the family moved in and thought, we've got to have a blessing for this house. George Lutz was a non-practicing Methodist. His wife, Kathy, was a non-practicing Catholic. And even that part of the story, Catholics and Methodists living in the same roof under harmony. Does it get any better than that? I don't know. You tell me. But anyway, neither of these were practicing their religion. But George did. Well, Kathy wasn't really familiar with the process. She tried to explain the process of a blessing of the house to George. Still a little unclear. But so George knew a Catholic priest named Father Ray, who agreed to carry out the house blessings. Now, in the book that was later written by, I believe, J. Ansons, or we'll just call him Anson for the sake of simplicity here, the real-life priest, Father Ralph Picario, is referred to as Father Mancuso for privacy reasons. But I guess that all went out the window in this glorious age of the internet. So Father Ralph Picario was the one that did the blessing. This father was a lawyer, a judge of the Catholic court, a psychotherapist who lived at the local Sacred Heart Rectory. And as the Lutzes are unpacking their home, he's going through and blessing the house. Now, he has said that when he started in a room, and he started in the bedroom of the previous family's, the husband and wife in their bedroom, with his holy water to do his blessing, and he distinctly heard a sound or a voice say, "Get out," a very masculine voice, "Get out," which has spawned a million stand-up comedy routines and a million references in movies, from Poltergeist to a gazillion other things, right? But that's apparently what the priest heard. Now, we didn't tell anybody at the time, which is a little suspicious, but who knows, that he heard this. He just continued with the blessings. Now, I'm going to go over their experiences, almost in creepypasta form here, if you'll bear with me. And then we'll kind of break down what people have seen in subsequent houses that might corroborate this, and kind of break down the facts for you, at least as I understand them. So here we go with what the Lutz family experienced in the Amityville haunting. George would wake up at 3:15 every morning and would go out to check the boathouse. Later, he would learn that this was the estimated time of DeFeo's killings. The house was plagued by swarms of flies, despite the winter weather. Kathy had vivid nightmares about the murders and discovered the order in which they occurred and the rooms where they took place. The Lutz children also began sleeping on their stomachs, in the same way the dead bodies in the DeFeo murders were found. Kathy would feel a sensation of being embraced in a loving manner by an unseen force. George discovered a small hidden room around 4 feet by 5 feet behind the shelving in the basement. The walls were painted red, and the room did not appear in any of the blueprints of the house. The room became known as the Red Room. This room had a profound effect on their dog Henry, who refused to go near it and cowered as if sensing something ominous. There were cold spots and odors of perfume and excrement in areas of the house where no wind drafts or piping could explain the source. While tending to the fire, George and Kathy saw the image of a demon with half his head blown out. It was burned into the soot in the back of the fireplace. The Lutz's 5-year-old daughter, Missy, developed an imaginary friend named Jody, a demonic pig-like creature with red glowing eyes. In the early morning hours of Christmas Day 1975, George looked up at the house window after checking on the boathouse and saw the pig standing behind Missy in her bedroom window. When he ran up to her room, he found her fast asleep with a small rocking chair slowly rocking back and forth. George would wake up to the sound of the front door slamming. He would run downstairs to find the dog sleeping soundly in front of the door. Nobody else heard the sound, although it was loud enough to wake the house. George would hear what was described as a marching band tuning up, or what sounded like a clock radio playing not quite on frequency. When he went downstairs, the noise would cease. George realized that he bore a strong resemblance to Ronald DeFeo Jr. and began drinking at the Witch's Brew, the bar where DeFeo was once a regular customer. When closing Missy's window, which Missy said Jolie climbed out of, Kathy saw red eyes glowing at her. While in bed, Kathy received red welts on her chest caused by an unseen force and was levitated 2 feet in the air. Cloven hoof prints attributed to an enormous pig appeared outside the house on January 1st, 1976. Locked doors and windows in the house were damaged by an unseen force. A 12-inch, 30-centimeter, crucifix hung in the living room wall, revolved until it was upside down and gave off a sour smell. George tripped over a 4-foot-high China lion ornament in the living room and found bite marks on his ankle Later, this lion would appear in the living room after George had moved it back upstairs into the sewing room. George saw Kathy transform into an old woman of 90. Her hair wild, a shocking white, the face a mask of wrinkles and ugly lines, and saliva dripping from her toothless mouth. Missy would sing constantly while in her room. Whenever she left the room, she would stop singing, and upon entering, would resume singing exactly where she left off. On one occasion, Kathy heard what sounded like a window being opened and closed through the sewing room door, even though she was sure no one was there. By mid-January 1976, another attempt, like we said earlier, at a house blessing by George and Kathy. They experienced what would turn out to be the final night in the house. The Lutzes declined to give an account of the events that took place on this occasion, describing them as too frightening. So those are the facts that are in the book. And let me just say something about the book before we really get into breaking this stuff down. The book was written by, I totally missed the deal on the book. The book was written after Tam Mossman, an editor at the publishing house of Princeton Hall, introduced George and Kathy Lutz to Jay Anson. The Lutzes did not work directly with Anson, but submitted about 45 hours of tape-recorded recollections to him, which were used as the basis of the book. Estimated sales of the book are around 10 million copies from its numerous editions. Anson is said to have based the title The Amityville Horror. So the author is the one that came up with this very famous title. Never actually had contact, for the most part. In interviewing, finding out the facts of his book, he had 45 hours of taped interviews with the Lutzes. Some of this stuff you'll find in a lot if you're a paranormal investigator and you go to people's homes. Now, a lot of paranormal groups don't do this. A lot of paranormal groups will go to a known haunted place to try to get proof of the paranormal, right? To try to get EVPs, check out the electromagnetic field in the area, try to get video, audio, and, video and audio if they can. There's nothing wrong with that kind of paranormal investigating, of trying to get the truth of what's out there onto the screen. A lot of people are doing this to try to get a network show. More power to them. If you're the kind of paranormal investigator that's not trying to prove anything to the world, but trying to help people, and there's nothing wrong with either groups of paranormal investigators, please don't get me wrong. You'll have experienced some of this stuff. The waking up at 3:15. 2 to 4 is a really common window for stuff to occur, usually around 3 o'clock. And it's been said by me, and more than just me, countless people, more people die in hospitals at 3 a.m. than any other time. Weird. Why that's true, nobody knows. It just comes, to me, it's kind of the reset time, 3 o'clock, right? It seems to be anyway. Or when maybe the veils are thinnest on a daily basis. I'm not sure. But that's kind of a statistical fact. Excuse me here. Now, the fly stuff, I haven't really heard of that too much, but it was a big part of the movie and a big part of the book. The nightmares of the murders, that makes sense to me as a paranormal investigator, that if you move into a house that's something that violent and, God, emotionally horrific, is going to leave an impression in the area as far as energy goes. And I know I've lost a lot of you right now going, oh, here we go with the new age crap. It's actually not so much new age as old age. This is stuff that's been recorded, gosh, for thousands of years. The weird one is her feeling embraced, and feeling the sensation of love and being safe. Maybe that was possibly the ghost of the woman that died, or maybe the children, if you believe that the house was haunted. The sensation, okay, finding the hidden room, that is weird, and that would freak me out. If I found a little room in my basement that had been painted red, I'd probably be kind of excited because I've got issues and I love the paranormal, so I'd be like, what is going on here? And just dive into the research of this house. And I can't believe nobody's done that. To dive into the research of who built that room? What is going on there? And that the dog would avoid the room. That's a big thing. I take my Chihuahua Lily. Some of you know her. She's sleeping right now, but here's a little effigy of her. When I take her on cases, and she goes on every case with me since I've gotten her, you could watch her react to stuff that's not there. Now, that happens with a lot of animals, but what are they seeing? We don't know. Weird. Okay. The cold spots and odors of perfume. I've experienced that so many times in houses I can't even tell you, and it recorded it. You know, a lot of people have the cold spots in houses. The wafting of perfume I've smelled in a number of houses that I've investigated. Almost like somebody's walked by you and you smell their perfume. The excrement, I haven't experienced so much. That might be a plumbing issue, something you might want to take a look at. The face of the demon in the fire, I think, is very subjective, with half of its head missing. Scrying, or it's not an unknown practice in pagan traditions to scry into a fire. In other words, to look into the fire to try to get images about your life, the universe, and everything, the future, the past. It's a form of divination. Steam is also another conduit that people use for this kind of thing, as well as water, looking into a bowl of water. If you've ever seen or read Lord of the Rings, you know about the scrying bowl of the elves. But things that you see there are very subjective. So it is what it is, I suppose. That he started drinking at the Witch's Brew, I think is just strange. The bar that DeFeo Jr., the killer, used to drink at, that he looked a bit like him. All right. Some of these stuff, like I say, the cloven hoof prints, I've never encountered it. But then again, I've never encountered a ghost pig. Hello, thank you very much. Green slime, though, a couple of that I didn't read. Green slime that oozed off the wall. I've only seen in Ghostbusters, that ectoplasmic stuff that was so popular way back around the turn of the century and before, from the 18th and 19th century, where mediums would be this ectoplasm. A lot of talk about it. I've never experienced it. The China, The rest of the stuff is just kind of stuff that the imaginary friend that we have seen in a zillion movies that turn out to be a ghost. I've seen children talking to something that's not there. They usually get pretty closed mouth about it when you try to talk to them. Having taught kids for so many years Aikido, it seems to be easy for me to communicate with children. Maybe because I'm incredibly immature. That's easily could be the case. But when you do get kids to open up, and you have to be careful about it, about what you take away from it, for sure. Because unfortunately, and I've said this in the past, a lot of the stuff, the behavior of the children in both hauntings and like UFO abduction cases, mirrors child sexual abuse and just child abuse so much that it's very hard to find the truth about what's going on when it comes to kids. It's a sad fact, but it's a fact of our society. One of the crazy things is that we're going to get into a little bit here, is Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, Ed and Lorraine Warren are very famous right now, paranormal investigators. From The Conjuring, right? The Conjuring 2, Annabelle the Doll. They have a museum of supposedly haunted items. They were very staunch Catholics. There was a bit of anti-Semitism going on with Ed, if we're being honest. Most of the cases they took, they would only take from Catholic people. And they came from a very Catholic bend to their investigating. Ed was a World War II Navy veteran and a former police officer, became a self-taught and self-professed demonologist, who is an author and lecturer, of course. Lorraine professed to be a clairvoyant and a light trance medium who worked closely with her husband. So these two would go in that way. But from their Catholic lens, for lack of a better term, that they looked through this stuff, and I'm not saying that they were completely wrong, but how they looked through this stuff, they would come to very Catholic deals. There were a lot of demons going on with these people, and some ghosts too, for sure, but a lot of demons happening for these folks. A few of their cases, people have, like in the case of The Conjuring 2, where they went, I can't remember the name of the case, I don't have it on my notes here either, but they go to this house in England where this young girl is supposedly having problem being beset on by an entity, right? A lot of people witnessed this. 2 police officers witnessed this. The family witnessed this. The neighbors, Ed and Lorraine Warren. At one point, though, they did find the young girl, faking evidence, throwing a table in the kitchen, she was filmed doing this, and then later saying it was a ghost that did it. Now, years later in an interview, the girl who's now a grown woman, had said the reason that she did that is that Ed and Lorraine Warren were leaving, and people were had stopped paying attention to the case. And they were desperate for help, these people. So she did that just to keep them interested, but that everything else was valid. The problem is when there's that kind of deal, your whole case is going to be discounted. And that's unfortunate, because in that particular case, I really do believe something was going on. It was the case that got me, that I heard about when I was 13, that made me dive in with both feet to actual paranormal investigation instead of just reading stories about it. I became obsessed, and then I went on my first investigation when I was 19, 6 years later. The problem with their investigation of the Lutz house, though, is, for one thing, they met with the Lutz family, who had already moved out, and basically had a 4-bottle dinner of wine, they had dinner with 4 bottles of wine. I know I'm tripping over myself today. And we're told about the stories during this evening of drinking. And then went back with a camera crew from the area. I'll read this to you. They participated in a psychic slumber party some 2 months after the Lutz abandoned their home in the middle of the night, followed by a camera crew from the local news affiliate. Lorraine sensed great malevolence in the house and insisted it was infested with demonic entities. A photograph that, if you're watching, is coming up now, was allegedly captured one such entity, though it is unlikely just they're saying more than likely it was just one of the crew members. I don't think so, because it looked like a young kid. It's a creepy picture of a kid, right, kind of peeking around a doorway. But is it proof? And it's not. Unfortunately, that is not solid proof. And that's the only time that they spent there in the house. It was just maybe a couple hours with the camera crew, and went completely off of Lorraine's gut feeling, right? Who was supposedly a clairvoyant and could go into medium trances, which is a huge holdover you have to understand from the old medium and spiritualism of the previous century, right? Where people would go to these guys for advice, go to these spiritualists, they called them, for advice. And pay them great sums of money to do so. And 99.9, if not all of them, were debunked as hoaxes. At least the ones that we're trying to make money off of. I'm sure there were some legit people out there, because I personally know people that are clairvoyant. Hand to God. And again, it's really one of those deals, either you believe it or you don't. You're not going to find proof for mediumships. You might find corroboration from some of the stuff that they've told you, but even that can be very suspect when it comes to that field. So that's what she's basing her deal on, her proof that this house is haunted. To me, it doesn't cut the mustard. That, and the fact that the townspeople knew nothing about what was going on in this house, other than one clergyman. And he just came back to bless the house again. He did hear the get out, right? If you believe this Catholic priest, he did hear get out as he started his blessing. And then when he went back for the second blessing, developed almost stigmata-like blisters on his hands and came down with a radical fever. Now, you can chalk a lot of that up to coincidence. And this case has seemed so far-fetched to me from the moment that I read the book, and I read the book, in the early 80s. Probably after the movie came out, I read the book, if I'm being honest. I'm still a kid, still a teenager. And it seems super far-fetched to me. Do I think something happened in this house? Absolutely I do. I really do believe some of this stuff is valid. But when you're investigating the paranormal, all right, just like if you were doing a murder investigation, what you don't do is put the entire family in one room, ask them what happened, right? Because what happens is the story starts building off of it. People start building off of each other. Oh yeah, and remember this thing that happened. Remember that thing that happened. It's just not the way to get to the truth. The way to do it is you separate each person and you get each person's story. And you hopefully do that on your first visit to the house, so people then don't have time to think and not on purpose, but embellish their stories. Exaggerating just seems to be a natural part of the human condition. And unfortunately, first-hand accounts are the least reliable. In my training, both in and out of the Army as an investigator, I'll just say what like the sheriff's department out here does, the LA Sheriff's Department, LA County Sheriffs, right? You'll be in the middle of your training. Somebody walks in the classroom situation, as the guy's lecturing, as your teacher's lecturing, fires off a gun and walks out. And then everybody's asked to describe the man, what he was wearing, what kind of gun it was, the whole 9 yards, right? And almost every person will have a different description of the guy that fired the gun. So in some cases, he's tall. Some cases he's short. Some cases he's black, Hispanic. Some cases he's white. Some cases it's male and female. And these are all people that are training to be police officers, right? And they do that as an example of, be sure to follow up first-hand accounts with proof and evidence, right? That's what builds a case. And if you're going to be an investigator, you want to do it right. Anyway, so my conclusion of this case, with all the evidence, I think that it started off with good intentions. You know, there was a murder that happened a year before this family moved in by a very disturbed young man who said that he heard voices. that drove him so nuts he killed his family. You have a family that moved in that sound like some horrible things happened to this family. But it really sounds like the author of this book, either the family or the author, took their stories and started exaggerating what was happening. It definitely hit a chord with America, though, as we pointed out at the beginning, with literally 18 movies, a book, countless documentaries, Ed and Lorraine Warren doing having it as part of their movie, The Conjuring, and as part of their case history. So, like I said, it really hit a chord. Do I buy it 100%? No, I don't. I don't think the facts line up completely with just first-hand accounts. Doesn't work like that in an investigation, or at least it shouldn't. But it makes for great video. That's the Amityville haunting. Really hope you enjoyed it. I don't like debunking stuff. Not really my gig. But this case got so much international attention, and has helped and hurt paranormal investigation, believe it or not. Really hope you dug it. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Please visit my Patreon page here. I'm really trying to get this show, to turn this show up a notch, to get to stories that you want to hear. So please, in the comments below, give me a case you guys want to hear. If you've heard about something historically that caught your interest, let me know. If you've got a case that you need help on, email me at rev.hagen@gmail.com, and we'll look into it. And if we can't, I'll refer you to somebody else. There's a lot of great groups out there. Right now, actual boots-on-the-ground investigation is not something that I'm devoting 100% of my time to. It's more this show and trying to get the idea out to the world that the paranormal is not something strange and unusual. It's a normal part of our lives, and has been with us since the dawn of time. So, keep walking that path, my brothers and sisters, and as always, you keep those heads up.